Immigration front and center again in Washington today as the judicial branch steps into the showdown over Dreamers, a federal judge temporarily blocking President Trump's efforts to end the DACA program, which protects hundreds of thousands who enter the U.S. illegally as children. The White House calls the injunction outrageous. Mr. Trump had some words on the subject earlier today.
We want to see something happen with DACA. It's been spoken of for years. Fact is, our country was such a mess, nobody even knows what the numbers are. But we'll know what the numbers are. But above all else, any bill we pass must improve jobs, wages, and security for American citizens. The people who elected us, all of us, the people that elected us, we have to take care of them.
The block came hours after the president appeared willing to negotiate a deal to protect young illegals and others from deportation. Democrat Elizabeth Warren claims he's broken America's promise to Dreamers, but she says she's willing to work with him.
The president has created a crisis for 800,000 young people. Every single day that goes by, young people are losing status, as it's called, which means they are subject to being deported by ICE. It means that they, for some of them, cannot legally show up for work anymore. Right. So the whole notion that we put that off is wrong.
Some conservatives don't want to see the president compromise on immigration.
Anyone in Washington starts talking about amnesty, legalization of any kind for people that have come into the United States illegally, there is a fresh surge across our border.
That's no art of the deal. That's complete surrender.
When Kevin McCarthy is the hardliner on immigration in the room, I think we can call this the lowest day in the Trump presidency.
Kimberly, one thing that's curious about this judge's decision in the Ninth Circuit is that when President Obama made the deal with the Dreamers, it was by executive order. And today, what you see is that the White House is having to grapple with the courts never said that Obama's order could not stand, but they're saying that President Trump's cannot stand, but it is also by executive order. So what do you think of that?
I think there's a disparity that's been and a bit of hypocrisy.
I was just trying to lead the witness.
Yes, absolutely. Way to lead the witness, always.
I rest my case.
Exactly.
We'll be
All
right
right,
back.
so the thing here is that you see that there's always this double standard as it relates to President Trump, but no surprise, too, with, like, the Ninth Circuit, with the travel ban, but everything gets sent back to them because they act in a bad way, and then they say, okay, we're going to send it back to you to actually review it by the proper standards, et cetera. So there shouldn't be a difference because it's the same mechanism by which he is actually putting this forward, just like President Obama did. But because they object to him doing it, they're going to find fault with it, but where they wouldn't otherwise with President Obama. And I think this is what he finds to be, particularly frustrating. And then as relates to the conservatives and the right, I believe, Greg, was yesterday you were saying that Ann Coulter would be none too pleased by this order.
What do you think of all this?
After yesterday, I've decided that I'm self-identifying as a dreamer. If Rachel Dolezal can self-identify as black, then I can dream. Seriously, why can't I?
Dare to dream, Greg.
There's been more read and said about the Dreamers since any group, probably since the Beatles. And I'm sorry to say to John Lennon, Jesus is now more popular than Jesus. That's a Beatles throwback joke for you. But Trump's exposing the sheer partisanship of the Democratic Party. This is all about being out of power because Trump's moving in their direction. This is the most nonpartisan politician you're going to see, and Ann Coulter is the proof. The angrier Ann Coulter gets, the more Liz Warren should be happy because he's moving away. He wants a deal. And a deal means that he is willing to do a lot more. So I don't know what the gripe is anymore. It's
because it's him.
Yeah, it's because it's him. And no matter what he does, it's not his demeanor and it's not his this illusion of dementia they talk about. It's because they are not in power and they don't like him, and that's it.
But it's not all just because it's him. I mean, on the policy side of things, the conservatives that were expressing disappointment, they are upset about that the policy could change. And I think it really does have to deal with how you define amnesty.
Right. So if you give the Dreamers the ability to vote, that would be a big problem for a lot of people. I would have a problem with it. That might not even be part of the deal. But a lot of people say 800,000 Dreamers now voting, probably 700,000 are going to vote for the Democrats. They're not going to like it. But if you look at the big deal as a whole, border hawks are getting a lot done. Not only are they getting funding for the border wall, they're getting more border agents, more immigration judges. They're getting rid of chain migration, which is basically my cousin Vinny. You know, yeah, you know him, your cousin, your uncle, come on in. That's ridiculous. The lottery system, they're getting rid of that. I mean, when you don't have a party, you don't have people come in through a lottery. Why are we having people come into the country through a lottery? It doesn't make sense. They're moving it towards a merit-based system. I think conservatives, especially border hawks, if they would take any of these items and put them into a group and say, you know what, but we got to legalize some dreamers. You don't punish the son for the sins of the father. They'd take it. In any deal, you're not going to be happy with 100%. I say on the whole, it's pretty good. And
today, this morning, Juan, I don't know if you saw Dana Milbank in the Washington Post was talking about how some on the far left and that represent Dreamers are actually asking for too much from Democrats and that they should just be supportive of the deal that they're going to get.
Well, I think it's a little different. He's saying that United We Dream has been attacking Democrats because Democrats have been willing to negotiate. For example, they approved the extension of the budget deal, which is now going to come up against January 20th. But over the Christmas, New Year holiday, and the Dreamers objected to that and said, wait a second, you promised you were going to stand by us. We shouldn't be a bargaining chip. But they have directed their ire at Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, and the Democrats for not being more vociferous, more aggressive in taking on the president on this issue, because as you heard them say, it was the president's decision last December to end DACA. And from the Dreamers' perspective, that created an artificial crisis. We could be having a discussion about the Dreamers without the idea of a March deadline when they would be forced out technically. And, of course, when you stop and think about that, it's true. Now, the problem here, I think, is twofold with this decision. One, I disagreed with you leading my most honorable witness. I just couldn't believe it. You know, I want to stand up for her. Because, in fact, the court didn't speak to whether or not there was any legitimacy to an executive order. This was about Donald Trump's tweets. Donald Trump said in a tweet that Dreamers are good, educated people, accomplished young people. They have jobs. They're in the military. Why would we kick them out? The judge in San Francisco then says, well, that sounds like the chief executive, whose job it is to make a judgment here, thinks this is in the public interest. It's up to the Congress to set the laws. But as we stand now, we think the public interest is served by what the president said. Mr. President, you get your wish. Don't kick out the Dreamers.
Well, perhaps what this all does is force Congress to actually not just have to worry about the president's deadline, but that there's now a court situation. So you have Republicans and Democrats, Kimberly, who came together yesterday, and now maybe there's more pressure on them to actually get it done.
Yeah, and I think that's what we're talking about here, you know, yesterday as well, is just like the negotiating and being able to try to come together. This is something that President Trump excels at, and he wants to put a little bit of pressure, a little bit of, you know, a foot on the pedal, give it a little bit of gas to make sure that Democrats are also going to try to engage. And it's fascinating, isn't it? Because you see, like you said, Dana, the people on the right getting very upset about some of this, saying it's too much of a giveaway. This was not, it's inconsistent with the campaign. So you've got, you know, vocal opponents on this side, like we saw. And then you have some Democrats who still don't seem to be happy enough with allowances that he's making that, in fact, are in direct accordance with what they were supporting. So, but if he's going to get the deal done, and the objective of this is to get a deal done, whether it's immigration or anything else, you know, DACA, Dreamers, whether it's on taxes, whether it's on health care, he wants to get it done. So what can he give and pressure to try to get them over to his level?
Who does the president need to persuade, or how could he persuade people to support a compromise?
Well, the funny thing about a compromise, the evidence of a compromise is when everybody is unhappy about a deal, right? That means that they didn't get everything. So if nobody gets everything they want, that means somebody gave up something. And so that's what you're seeing. You're seeing Ann Coulter on the hard immigration side, and you have the Democrats, and everybody's ticked off about something. That's what happens in a negotiation, in a deal. However, I don't go for deals for the sake of a deal. I mean, and we talked about that with taxes. He just wanted a tax deal, but we didn't, in its initial stages, we weren't pleased with it because it just felt like he wanted a deal. Yeah. But now it's kind of happening, and we kind of knew this is, you know, Bannon's gone. He's got more room to play.
Well, we'll see. I mean, right now there's lots of concern that, in fact, you know, Bannon's acolytes in the White House continue to block the deal. but by insisting on the wall. Because just today we saw that immigration, people crossing the border now, is at a 45-year low. But he continues
He's
to
the wall.
He's fine. Okay, fine. But then you don't need all these billions for an actual wall, so let's make a deal.
That's based on the promise, and the premise is based on the promise.
And the statistics show that just this last month, 1,000 illegal aliens were caught crossing per day. Per day. And those are just the ones that have gotten caught. And I'm sure another 1,000 are slipping by. So the wall, you complained yesterday that it was too expensive. I think it's $30 billion. $30 billion. I looked it up.
Yeah.
Medicare, each year they spend about $600 billion.
What are you comparing the wall to Medicare?
$600 billion. $30 billion is a drop in the bucket compared to that.
Taking care of people who are American citizens who are in need of medical care is this equivalent of the wall?
Stopping illegal aliens that end up hurting people and putting them in the hospitals
Look,
is also very important.
You know what? We report, you decide, audience. You tell. Wow.
Yeah, I think the audience is going to go here.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think people know that if they need medical care,
you want security.
Oh, yeah, well, you do.
Is security
what
too
I'm saying
much
to you,
for you?
what I'm saying to you is the Democrats, and this goes back to what you were proposing earlier. Let's have a reasonable discussion. Democrats want the Dreamers to stay. I think actually President Trump wants the Dreamers to stay. But they're willing to negotiate in terms of added boots on the ground on the border, more security in terms of the drones, the aircrafts, the electronic surveillance. But then Trump comes out and says, no, no, no. We got to have the wall because he wants to fulfill this.
Because he's a good negotiator.
No, because, well,
and I guarantee you're going to have wall funding and the Dreamers protected.
Well, I'm all for it.
What will end up happening is that he'll call it wall funding, and the Democrats will say it's more border security, and everybody will just go home, and it's how you brand it.
But the other thing about, this wanting the Dreamers to stay only became an argument now, which means that Donald Trump made that a chit. He made that something to negotiate over, which is now allowing him to make progress on enhancing border control, no matter what you call it. So he actually made something. What?
I think it was a Steve Bannon move.
Yeah, it might have been. He is a genius. But here was something that was kind of just understood to just be there. Now is kind of like, well, maybe it isn't. And now you have a negotiation.
Well, I think that's right. But that's why the Democrats say he created an artificial crisis. But he did it, in your description, I think aptly, as a negotiating tool. But the thing is now, we're up against it. And so you get people like Coulter and Mark Levine and others saying, hey, wait a minute, this is not what you promised in the campaign.
But he said he would take the heat.
Yeah.
He said he likes heat. His whole life's been.
Who doesn't love heat, especially in this wintry weather? It's quite cold out.
I got to tell you, 30 is the new 70.
It really is.
All right.